One moment, my daughter was beaming with pride, carefully placing her favorite sparkly animal stickers on our gray mailbox, each one a tiny burst of joy from a child who rarely gets to express herself so freely. And then a loud, sharp bang shattered the peace. I jumped, heart pounding, spinning around to see smoke curling from the end of Karen's small pistol. She stood on the edge of her lawn, arms stiff, eyes hard, her voice echoing, "I warned you. That's HOA property, and I will not tolerate defacement." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My daughter, frozen, stared at the crumpled sticker fragments now fluttering to the ground like ashes. She didn't understand what had just happened, but she knew something terrible had stolen her smile. And in that moment, so did I. I never imagined a neighbor, let alone a grown woman, would feel so threatened by a child's stickers that she'd shoot at a mailbox. But this wasn't about stickers. This was about control, about cruelty, about someone who thought rules gave her the right to terrorize. And as the police sirens began to howl in the distance, I knew this was only the beginning. We moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago, full of hope and holding tightly to the belief that things would finally settle for us, and most importantly for our daughter, Ellie. Ellie was born with a developmental condition that affects both her communication and coordination. She doesn't speak in full sentences, but she expresses herself in colors, textures, and laughter. Her joy doesn't come from toys or screens, but from simple things. Wind chimes, flower petals, soft fabrics, and most of all, stickers. She loves stickers. They're her way of connecting with the world. Each sticker she places feels like her saying, "Look, I'm here. I made something beautiful." When we found this home, tucked in a quiet cul-de-sac with a park down the street, it felt like the perfect place to finally let Ellie just be a child. We wanted peace. We wanted quiet joy. We wanted the kind of life where our daughter could decorate her corner of the world without fear or judgment. And for a while, we had that. We built routines, Ellie's therapy in the mornings, walks after dinner, art time in the afternoons. She especially loved walking to the mailbox with me. She'd run her hand across its cool metal, giggling, and point to it like it was her canvas. So one afternoon when she asked in her own way to put stickers on the mailbox, I said yes. Why wouldn't I? She had just completed a full therapy session without any meltdowns, and that little victory deserved to be celebrated. We picked out some of her favorite stickers, smiling suns, kittens, and sparkly stars. She placed them one by one, gently pressing each one as if sealing a memory. When she finished, she clapped her hands and gave me that look, the one that says, "Did I do good?" And she had. She always does. Decorating the mailbox became a little tradition for us. Every week or so, we'd wipe it down, take off the old stickers, and add new ones. It made Ellie feel like part of the neighborhood, like she had something that was hers. And for a child who constantly faces invisible barriers, stares from strangers, misunderstanding from peers, a world that rarely slows down to meet her where she is, that tiny space of self-expression meant everything. We kept everything neat. The mailbox was always clean, undamaged, and fully functional. The stickers were small, cheerful, and removable. Nothing about it broke any official rules, or so we thought. The HOA guidelines never mentioned sticker decorations, and no one ever said a word to us, not directly, but we started noticing. Certain neighbors walked by a little slower. Some wouldn't wave anymore. And Karen never liked it. We caught her staring more than once, her lips tight, eyes scanning Ellie like she was inspecting a mess. Still, we believed we were doing nothing wrong. And even if someone did have a problem, surely they could just talk to us. We're not the type to make waves. We just wanted our daughter to feel joy, to feel normal, to feel seen. And until that awful day when everything changed, that mailbox, covered in stars, kittens, and love, had become a small symbol of that dream. A dream we didn't know someone was willing to destroy with a single violent act. Karen wasn't just a neighbor, she was the enforcer. The kind of person who didn't just read the HOA rulebook, but practically wrote her own. She lived directly across the street from us, in a house that looked like it had been lifted straight out of a suburban magazine, every hedge clipped with precision, porch spotless, blinds always perfectly angled. And behind those blinds, Karen, watching, judging, recording like the self-appointed sheriff of the street. From the very beginning, Karen made it clear that she didn't like anything outside her narrow vision of what a neighborhood should be. The first time she approached us, it was about our grass. "It's a quarter-inch too high," she said, pointing to the edges near the walkway. "It brings down the look of the block." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. A week later, we received an official notice from the HOA. Next, it was Ellie's pinwheel. She had picked it out herself, bright colors that spun in the wind. We placed it in our flower bed by the front porch. Karen left a note in our mailbox. "Please remove the toy. It violates the uniformity clause of exterior decor." A pinwheel. For a child. That was her problem. She even complained once about Ellie's laughter. "Your daughter gets quite loud in the afternoons," she told me, arms crossed, lips pursed like she had tasted something bitter. "Some of us work from home." I wanted to snap back. Instead, I just nodded and walked away, heart pounding, blood boiling. Karen didn't believe in community. She believed in control. Her control. She filed complaints like it was a hobby, made calls to the HOA over holiday lights, patio furniture, trash cans left out for 10 extra minutes. No one was safe from her scrutiny, but we quickly realized that families like ours, the ones that didn't fit her standard, were her favorite targets. What made Karen especially dangerous wasn't just her obsession with rules, it was her anger. It simmered beneath her carefully polished exterior. The way she slammed her car door if Ellie was playing outside, the way she glared when we hosted Ellie's therapy group for outdoor activities. She never yelled. She didn't need to. Her quiet hostility said it all. Neighbors often whispered about her, but rarely challenged her. She had a reputation and not a good one. Someone once told me she once threatened to sue a family for installing a swing set that ruined her backyard view. She didn't just complain. She escalated. Still, I never imagined she'd go this far. I knew she didn't like us. I knew she didn't approve of Ellie's stickers. But to go from passive-aggressive notes to pulling a trigger, that wasn't just Karen being Karen. That was something darker. Something more dangerous. Something that should have been stopped long before it ever reached our mailbox. It was a sunny Wednesday afternoon, warm but breezy, with the kind of golden light that makes everything feel gentle. Ellie had just finished a particularly challenging therapy session, and we'd promised her a reward, sticker time. She had a fresh sheet of glittery animal stickers and a handful of colorful stars. Her face lit up the moment I handed them to her. Without needing words, she gestured toward the mailbox, her favorite canvas. I smiled and nodded. She clapped her hands with excitement. We stepped outside together, and I sat on the porch while she crouched by the mailbox, carefully peeling and placing each sticker. She didn't rush. She never does. Every sticker was chosen with care. A sleepy panda here, a sparkly shooting star there. With each press of her small hand, she turned that dull gray box into something bright and alive. I could hear her humming softly to herself. That little tune she made up months ago, it wasn't just art for her. It was joy. It was therapy. It was her way of saying, "This is mine. I belong here." I pulled out my phone and took a picture, her crouched next to her stickered masterpiece, sun in her hair, cheeks flushed from concentration. I planned to send it to her therapist later just to say, "Look at her. Look how proud she is." In that moment, everything felt peaceful. Until I heard the footsteps. I looked up to see Karen walking her usual route, phone in one hand, sunglasses perched on her head, scowl already in place. I braced myself. She slowed as she approached, stopping right in front of Ellie. "What is this?" she asked sharply, eyes narrowing at the mailbox. Ellie froze. She looked up at Karen, then back at me, unsure whether she had done something wrong. I stood up and walked over calmly. "They're just stickers," I said, keeping my tone light. "Ellie likes decorating the mailbox. They're removable. We change them every week. Nothing permanent." Karen didn't look at me. Her eyes stayed locked on Ellie. "This is vandalism," she said flatly. "It's graffiti. Mailboxes are federal property. You can't just let your kid trash it with this. My jaw clenched, but I forced a breath. With respect, Karen, it's not graffiti. It's stickers. They're not damaging anything. She finally turned to me, eyes sharp. It doesn't matter if it peels off. It's an eyesore, and it violates the HOA's standards for uniformity. If you don't take it off, I'll file a complaint. Go ahead. I replied more firmly now. We're not breaking any rules. The mailbox is intact, and the stickers come off cleanly. It's just a way for my daughter to express herself. Ellie stood now, holding the last sticker in her hand, a little rainbow kitten, and stared silently at Karen. She was still smiling when we came outside. That smile was gone now. Karen scoffed. You're teaching her that rules don't apply. That's the problem with parents these days. No respect for order. I stepped in front of Ellie then, my body instinctively shielding her. We're teaching her that she matters, that she can find joy in small things. You may not understand that, but I won't let you take it from her. Karen gave me one last glare, then turned sharply and walked off down the street without another word. But the damage had already been done. Ellie didn't say anything. She simply looked down at the sticker still clutched in her fist. Her hands were trembling slightly. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She understood that her happiness had made someone angry, and that confusion, that shrinking in her posture, broke me. I knelt down beside her and said softly, You didn't do anything wrong. Your stickers are beautiful. I'm proud of you. She looked up at me with glassy eyes, nodded once, and slowly stuck the rainbow kitten on the side of the box, her final act of defiance, quiet but brave. We went inside after that, but the mood had shifted. The air felt heavier. I didn't know what Karen would do next, but I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't the end. It was only the warning shot. It happened the very next morning. The sun had barely risen when I stepped outside with my coffee in hand, hoping for a quiet moment before Ellie woke up. The street was still and silent, dew clinging to the grass, the sky painted in soft pastels. I took a few steps toward the curb, glanced at the mailbox, and froze. The front panel of the mailbox was bent inward, dented and scraped. Ellie's carefully placed stickers, the sparkly stars, the rainbow kitten, the sleepy panda, were torn and scattered across the ground like confetti after a storm. My chest tightened. I blinked, thinking maybe a car had backed into it, or maybe a neighborhood kid had done something stupid. But then I saw her. Karen stood across the street on her front lawn, holding something in her hand, something small, black, and unmistakably shaped like a gun. My stomach dropped. She wasn't trying to hide it. In fact, she was cleaning it with a rag like it was just another gardening tool. Calm, cold, almost proud. What the hell did you do? I shouted, walking toward her, disbelief turning to rage. She looked up, casually like I had asked her about the weather. It was vandalism, she said. I removed it. Problem solved. I stared at her, stunned. You shot our mailbox because of stickers? Stickers placed by a disabled child? Karen shrugged. You refused to take them off. I warned you. If the HOA won't enforce the rules, someone has to. I stepped back, heart pounding. This wasn't just about stickers anymore. This was dangerous. Karen had crossed a line most people don't even think about crossing. She had taken a weapon, aimed it at our property, and fired. And for what? Glittery animal stickers? I pulled out my phone immediately and dialed 911, my hands trembling. Yes, I need to report a neighbor who just discharged a firearm at my property. My mailbox is damaged, and she's still holding the gun. The dispatcher's voice remained calm, but I could hear the seriousness in her tone. She promised officers would be there immediately. As I stood on the sidewalk, trying to keep my breathing steady, I turned to see Ellie standing at the front door. She had woken up and come outside, probably wondering why I was yelling. She saw the mailbox, the broken pieces, the crumpled stickers, and her face changed. Not fear at first, confusion, then sadness, then something far worse, shame. She looked at me, eyes wide, and asked softly, Did I do bad? That question broke me. I walked over and knelt in front of her. No, sweetheart, I said, my voice cracking. You did nothing wrong. Someone else did. Someone who doesn't understand what beautiful means. Behind me, Karen stood smug on her porch, still watching. The police sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder, rushing toward our little street. And all I could think was, this isn't just about Ellie's stickers anymore. This is about safety, about sanity, about how far some people will go to destroy joy just because they can't control it. And for the first time since moving into this neighborhood, I was afraid not of rules or fines or HOA meetings, but of my own neighbor. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the silence of our street like a warning bell. I stood with my arm around Ellie, who clung to my side, eyes wide and glued to the broken mailbox. She hadn't said a word since asking if she'd done something wrong. I kept repeating in my head, protect her. Stay calm. Do not let this become something worse. Two squad cars arrived and parked at an angle, blocking off part of the street. The officers, one younger, one older, stepped out quickly, but not aggressively. Their eyes scanned the scene. Me, standing with my daughter, and across the street, Karen, now seated on her porch chair like this was just another morning coffee. Sir, the younger officer said as he approached me, we got a report about a firearm being discharged. Can you walk us through what happened? I nodded, swallowing hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. My daughter decorated our mailbox with stickers yesterday. This morning, I came out and found it damaged, dented, stickers ripped off. Karen, my neighbor, was standing across the street holding a handgun. She admitted she shot it, said it was vandalism. I called immediately. The officer's expression stiffened. He glanced at the mailbox, then across the street to Karen. Stay here, he said, and signaled his partner to join him. They walked over to Karen's porch. I couldn't hear every word, but I saw the way Karen straightened her posture, like she was completely justified. I warned them, she said loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. They refused to remove the decorations. The HOA rules are clear: uniformity in all public-facing fixtures. I used a legal self-defense tool to protect my property values. It was symbolic. The officers exchanged looks. The younger one said something to her quietly, then motioned toward the gun, which she handed over with a dramatic sigh. It wasn't a full-caliber firearm, more like a small .22 pistol or possibly even a high-powered pellet gun. Still, it was a weapon, and she used it to shoot at something just 20 feet from our front door. They came back over to me. We've secured the weapon, the older officer said. Your neighbor claims she believed the mailbox decorations were a violation of HOA policy and acted to remove them. By shooting, I asked, incredulous, with my daughter in the house? What if she had been near it? I understand, he replied, his tone neutral. We're filing a report. This is considered destruction of property, but because it's a shared fixture, it gets complicated jurisdiction-wise. We'll also document the discharge of the weapon. So she's not being arrested? I asked, stunned. For now, no, he said. The gun wasn't fired in the direction of any person, and it appears to have been a single shot at an object. But we're escalating it to our supervisor for review. I highly recommend you press charges for property damage and speak with your HOA directly. I nodded, though every part of me wanted to scream. Behind me, Ellie stepped forward slowly, staring at the ruined mailbox. One sticker, a half-torn, glittery cat, still clung to the side. She walked up to it and placed her hand on the dented metal, her small fingers trembling. Then she turned back to me and asked quietly, "Are they taking me away?" The world stopped. I knelt beside her instantly. No, baby. No one's taking you anywhere. You didn't do anything wrong. You made something beautiful and someone else broke it. That's not your fault. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. I held her close as the officers finished taking statements. Karen stood at the edge of her lawn, arms crossed, smugness written all over her face, like she had won something. But this wasn't a win. This was the beginning of something else. I wasn't going to let this end in silence. The mailbox could be replaced, but the fear in Ellie's eyes, that needed justice. As the officers drove away with their report in hand and Karen returned to her porch like nothing happened, I made a silent vow. I would fight this. For Ellie, for every child who has been made to feel small in a world that should celebrate them. At first, the neighborhood was eerily quiet, too quiet. No one knocked. No one came to ask questions. For a couple of days, it felt like the whole street had collectively chosen to look the other way, pretending nothing had happened. We just had a gun fired at our mailbox because of a disabled child's decorations, and yet somehow the world outside our front door kept watering their lawns, walking their dogs, and waving politely as if normalcy could erase what had just happened. But the silence didn't last. The local neighborhood Facebook group, typically used for lost pets and lawn maintenance tips, lit up with a thread titled, Mailbox Incident: What Really Happened? It was posted by someone anonymous, but the comments came in fast. The first few were from the usual suspects, quietly defending Karen. If the family had followed the rules, none of this would have happened. Decorating mailboxes is against HOA code, even if it's a kid. One even wrote, Karen was just protecting the neighborhood standards. We all agreed to them. But then something shifted. A neighbor, a mother of two, chimed in. My kids saw the whole thing. Karen shot at their mailbox. Are we really defending that? Over stickers? Another wrote, disability or not, a child's joy shouldn't be met with violence. What are we teaching our community? More voices joined in. A retired teacher commented, Ellie stickers made me smile every time I passed by. I didn't even know her, but I knew that mailbox. Shame on anyone who sees that kind of creativity as a threat. Suddenly, we weren't alone anymore. That same evening, someone left a bouquet of sunflowers on our porch with a card that simply read, Ellie is loved here. Another day, we found a bag of new stickers in our mailbox, animals, stars, hearts, and glitter shapes. No note, just kindness. Then, one morning, we stepped outside to find something that made me stop in my tracks. The mailbox, still dented, had been gently cleaned and decorated again. This time not just by Ellie, but by others. Small stickers lined the edges, peace signs, smiley faces, colorful words like joy and shine. Someone had even left a laminated note taped to the side. This mailbox belongs to Ellie's imagination, and we support it 100%. Tears welled to my eyes. Not because the problem was gone, it wasn't, but because in a place where cruelty had shouted so loudly, kindness had finally spoken back. Karen never responded publicly, but we noticed her blind stayed closed for several days. She didn't pace her porch. She didn't glare. Maybe she was regrouping. Maybe she was embarrassed. But one thing was certain. She was no longer the loudest voice on the block. The community had spoken. Not perfectly, not all at once, but enough to remind us that light, even when dimmed, always finds a way back. The next morning, I walked into the HOA office with a folder full of evidence. Photos of the damaged mailbox, screenshots of a neighborhood thread, the police report, and a written timeline of everything that had happened. I requested a formal meeting with the board. I wasn't asking for a favor, I was demanding accountability. The woman at the front desk looked uncomfortable as she skimmed the papers. We'll have to bring this to the next board review, she said. But please understand, we try not to get involved in disputes between neighbors unless it's a clear violation of HOA guidelines. I stared at her, stunned. A woman shot at my property, with a child nearby. That's not a neighborly dispute. That's a safety issue. She nodded politely, clearly trying to keep things bureaucratic. We'll review the documentation and notify you of the board's decision. I left feeling disgusted. They wanted to treat this like a noise complaint, like it could be resolved with a warning letter and a polite shrug. But I wasn't letting this go. That afternoon, I called the attorney we'd spoken to before. I gave her the full update, and she didn't mince words. You have grounds, she said. Destruction of property, intimidation, possibly endangerment if you can show your daughter was nearby. At the very least, a civil complaint against both Karen and the HOA for failing to act. We got the paperwork started that same week. Meanwhile, the fallout continued at home. Ellie, once so excited to decorate the mailbox, now avoided even looking at it. She'd tug my hand away whenever we walked toward it, whispering, "No stickers. Bad." It broke my heart. That small ritual had brought her so much happiness, and now it was a source of fear. She had absorbed the lesson Karen intended to send. Your joy is not welcome here. That was what made me angrier than anything. Not the dented mailbox, not the HOA's cowardice, not even Karen's smug silence. It was the way this woman had managed to take a child's innocent joy and turn it into something painful. A few days later, we finally had our HOA meeting. It was awkward, impersonal, and cold. I laid out the entire story, calmly, professionally, fact by fact. The board members listened, nodded, asked a few questions. Then, in the end, they issued their decision. Karen would receive a formal written warning for improper conduct under community standards. No fine, no suspension, no real consequence. They offered to assist with repairs to the mailbox, as if a fresh coat of paint would fix what had been done. I left the meeting furious, but unsurprised. So I documented everything, every note, every email, every new incident. I started a private folder labeled HOA Watch and added to it weekly. I made sure Karen saw me take photos, saw me recording video when she stared us down from across the lawn. I wasn't hiding anymore, because this wasn't just about our mailbox or even Karen. This was about the message being sent to every family who dared to be different. You don't belong. But we did belong. And I was done asking for permission to exist peacefully in a neighborhood that was supposed to be our home. Karen may have fired the first shot, literally, but I was going to be the one to make sure it echoed back with truth, action, and justice. ChatGPT said, "Looking back, I've realized this was never about stickers. Not really. It was about something far deeper and more dangerous: control, intolerance, and the fear people have of anything that doesn't fit neatly inside their rigid view of the world." Ellie's stickers weren't loud. They weren't offensive. They didn't damage anything. But to someone like Karen, they represented a loss of control, a tiny burst of individuality in a place obsessed with conformity. And when control is all someone has, they'll go to shocking lengths to defend it, even if it means pulling a trigger on something as innocent as a child's joy. This experience showed me how vulnerable disabled children and their families really are, not just to the obvious dangers, but to the quiet ones. The cold stares, the passive-aggressive notes, the neighbors who stay silent, the rules that seem neutral but are enforced with bias. For families like mine, every smile, every laugh, every small expression of joy comes with a cost, because there will always be someone, somewhere, who believes that difference equals disturbance. But here's the truth: it doesn't. Ellie's laughter isn't a threat. Her stickers aren't graffiti. Her presence isn't something to tolerate, it's something to celebrate. And every child, disabled or not, deserves the freedom to express themselves without fear. They deserve more than just tolerance. They deserve protection, encouragement, a space to grow and be seen. To every parent out there fighting these invisible battles, I see you. I know how exhausting it is to explain, to advocate, to defend what should never need defending. But please, keep going, keep speaking, keep showing up, because your voice matters even when it shakes, especially when it shakes. To anyone listening who's ever stood by silently while someone else was targeted, now is the time to change that. Speak up, step in. Don't let kindness become the quietest thing on your street. Because if people like Karen are bold enough to enforce cruelty, then we must be even bolder in defending compassion. And finally, to those in positions of authority, HOA boards, city officials, even community members who carry influence, remember this: rules without empathy become tools of oppression. Guidelines are meant to create community, not erase individuality. They're supposed to protect, not punish. And if they're being used to target the vulnerable, then they're not rules worth keeping. Ellie still loves stickers, and I still let her use them. Maybe not on the mailbox anymore, but we've found other ways. Her bedroom door, her therapy journal, sometimes even my arm when I'm not looking. And every time I see her place one down with care, I'm reminded that joy is an act of resistance. So, no, this was never just about stickers. It was about whether a child's joy deserves a place in the world. And I'll keep fighting to make sure it does. If this story shocked you, if it made you angry or emotional, or just tired of how often families like ours are targeted for simply existing, then I invite you to stand with us. Because this wasn't just a one time thing. This is part of a pattern, and trust me, it gets even worse. After the mailbox incident, we thought things would finally quiet down. We were wrong. Karen's next move? She tried to file a claim against us, claiming mental distress because Ellie waved at her dog. Yes, you heard that right. A child's wave was turned into a legal threat. And in the next video, I'll show you exactly how we responded. So, if you believe in standing up for what's right, if you believe that no child should be punished for being joyful, and if you're ready to hear what happened next, backhand index pointing right, hit that like button. Speech balloon, leave a comment if you've ever had to deal with a nightmare neighbor or HOA madness. Loudspeaker share this video. And most importantly, television subscribe to the HOA stories and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. We're not done. Not even close. Because Ellie's joy won't be silenced, and we're just getting started.